We live?
Hey, can we get
Just
the
so we're clear,
water on
that
here, please?
wasn't my fault. Next time,
yes, sir. I'm Leroy.
Mortisa.
Mortisa.
What's happening here at Power?
Can we get the
These
draft
are
water? Yes, sir.
shows,
Yes, sir.
yes, and new events that help us connect with the community. Follow us on
Hey,
Facebook
Mr. Spear,
and
what
Instagram
channel is that
Power
draft
108.9.
jump coming
You can
on?
also go to Power 108.9.
I would think ESPN.
Oh,
but
awesome. We're on it, sir.
Updated news and
Could be wrong.
happenings here at Power. Thanks for listening.
We got it, boss.
I feel like there's a joke that just happened that I missed
You
somewhere
and
in
me
there.
both. You and me both.
You turn my headphones down just a little?
Oh, of course, sir. Anything else?
I'm
How's that right there, sir?
I'm not going to complain about anything ever again. I'm going deaf over here, but it's no big deal. Everything's fine. Can you not hear? These were on your head just before mine?
Mortisa?
Exactly. Fantastic.
Michael is from a very prestigious shrine.
That was in the rehearsal. I'm
Right.
assuming it's on
Six.
ESPN, but I don't.
Nah, I got you,
actually.
baby boy. You good. You on.
Hey, Google.
You go. It's on. It's right here.
Oh, all right.
Math. I mean, it's right here, baby boy.
I get
You
you.
good.
I'll
I
trust
got
you.
Look at the caution.
My Jesus, the Cardinals are
Michael.
pounding the Braves.
Michael.
Aaron's.
Brought to you by. You ready
Oh,
this
no.
radio?
He says NBA so rigged. Does that mean we already had the draft lottery, Brandon, and
Go
we
talk
missed
to
it?
the camera.
We missed it.
Let's
So
go.
the Knicks must have gotten the first pick if the NBA is so rigged, according to Brandon Greenwich.
You ready?
I'm ready.
What's up, Todd Jones? Harley Dow.
Huge controversy. Remember that, Mr. Spear?
Frozen envelope.
Put his hand in.
Come on, Carl.
Start your show.
It's the Huddle. It's Tuesday night. We're hanging out live from the Battery. The Braves are getting their tail kicked by the Cardinals, 10-0 right now, right outside of where we're hanging out here. Welcome in. Thanks for being here. Those of you that are listening, we got 8 and Dallas is 10. So we got the 8th pick when we could have gotten somewhere in the top 4, and we're 8 and 10. I knew that was going to happen, Brandon. Not going to lie. I kind of figured the Hawks would end up nowhere above 6. So, hey, this is being an Atlanta sports fan.
So, do we get 2 picks or not?
Yeah, the Dallas pick conveyed. So Dallas's pick was 10.
So
and
we get 2 picks in the
two
top
picks
10.
in the top 10.
That's time to celebrate.
Sure, I guess. Yeah, sure. We could have ended up with a top 5 pick, and instead we ended up with 8 and 10, which is about what I expected. Anyway, Grizzlies. Brandon's giving us live updates. Thanks, Brandon Greenwich. Thanks, Doc.
I got you, baby boy. So the Knicks 3rd, Lakers at 4, Grizzlies at 2, which means that
Pelicans
the
at number 1.
Pelicans at number 1.
So they get. None of them got it right. Yeah. So this is the way the NBA works. It's a very odd system. We can talk about that some other night. Welcome in. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk about this. We actually are still going to talk about it because it was a big part of my show tonight because I had big things and I wasn't thinking that we were going to be drafting at 8. I wasn't thinking we were going to pick 1 because I thought that was a pipe dream. Mr. McFadden, how are you this evening?
All is well and dandy. Thank you to the Miller Lite that was provided by the Takeover.
Absolutely. And speaking of the Takeover, Mr. Carter, how are you this evening?
I am fantastical.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here sitting in
That's a word.
with our featured guest of the week,
Andy Gunnan.
none other than Andy Gunnan.
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
Andy, how are you tonight?
I am doing fantastic.
I have not seen Andy Gunnan since we were in, I don't know, high school.
It's probably high school at least.
Yeah.
At least.
So but you were always a good friend and the only story I have, I don't want to
Here we
incriminate
go.
you,
Oh God, here we go.
but we'll incriminate each other.
Okay.
So we were in middle school,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And health class was very different.
Oh, here we go. I
Yeah.
know where we're going now.
Yeah. So a coach taught our health class.
That is correct.
And coach comes in one day and he says, "What do you guys call a woman's vagina?" So it's quiet, just
Yep,
like Carl
yep,
looked away,
yep.
nervous, and
Yeah,
he's
you
just
get
like,
a
"What the
pin
fuck?"
drop.
Yeah, pin drop. Andy and I are sitting next to each other, and we want to say it. We want to say it.
Right.
And he says, "Say it."
Yep.
It's all guys in here. It's
He
all
did.
boys in here.
He asked for it.
And he said, What do you have?" And we could not, we tried to compete with saying pussy first. And we said it simultaneously. It was brilliant. And then the whole thing, have you ever seen Nemo with your kids and the pelicans and
Right.
whatnot?
Yeah.
And they're like, "My, my, 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 my."
Mike.
Every other kid in that thing was like, "Pussy, pussy, pussy."
What grade was this? Say
Eighth
that.
grade.
Yeah.
So was it
Eighth
Coach,
grade.
was it
It
Coach
eighth
Fuller?
grade. I
It
remember-
was Fuller.
Was it Coach
yeah,
Fuller?
was
yeah,
Fuller.
I remember it like it was yesterday.
That's awesome.
Oh God, yeah.
That's incredible.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I was really fearful that the story was going to be a lot worse than that.
Me
I'm
too.
not gonna lie.
I trust
No,
me.
no,
I was
no.
like, where is
Andy,
he going?
no.
with this? I
Andy
could not
asked me.
remember.
Andy asked me on the way over here. He's
Holy
like,
fuck.
does he have something on me?
No.
I was like, he's like, "You're not bringing me here to set me up."
Oh, no, I
was
wouldn't do that. You guys have a good show.
All right, brother.
Thank you, man.
Fantastic, Mr. Carter.
Good seeing you, brother.
Love you, bud. See you soon.
See you soon.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna come back, and I had stuff to talk about with the lottery, so we're still gonna talk about it real quick. Andy's here to talk about NASCAR tonight. We're gonna talk about him doing stand-up comedy. We're gonna get into several things tonight. It's gonna be a great show. Stick around. You're in the Huddle, Power 108.9. The furry. Oh my goodness, man, that's a bummer. I didn't think we'd end up 8 and 10. I
What's up,
really.
Justin Bishop?
I'm gonna have to cut you off, Carl. Did you hear me?
Valerie.
I know you
you're
said
so
you're gonna,
nice.
you're gonna have to cut me off.
Yeah, we got 2 top 10 picks.
Yeah,
bruh.
and listen, I'm going to talk about it, and it's fine. I
We'll
mean,
talk about don't elaborate now.
yeah.
Don't elaborate now, because we're gonna get mad. Are you coming back in with basketball?
I am, and then, but we're not going to stick around on that. We're
No,
going
that's
to
fine.
talk about it briefly, and then we'll have another quick break, and then we're going to get into NASCAR with Andy.
Well, you can't tell us when we're gonna have breaks, man. Nah, I had to control.
Sorry, I apologize.
He takes over.
Yeah,
I don't care, man. This,
It's the
this is
dad.
awesome. I'm having a great time.
It's the daddy in
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
So
yeah,
all right.
totally.
You ready, baby boy?
Ready.
They're playing basketball. We love that basketball.
You're back in the Huddle.
They're playing basketball.
Power 108.9. We just found out the results of the draft lottery. Somehow, these things never tend to go the way you think they're going to go. And the New Orleans Pelicans have ended up with the number 1 pick and what you know is going to be drafting Zion Williamson, which they have a superstar on their team currently in Anthony Davis, who is not happy there. And, now maybe he sees them drafting Zion and finds a future in New Orleans. I don't know. All I can tell you is that Michael is briefly here going to make a case that we should be very happy that we have 2 top 10 picks. And I'm going to tell you, while I try to give him the positive side of this, I did tell Andy a while ago, we were talking about this, and I said the one thing you can take as a positive is that the Hawks under the current leadership have found guys in spots that have contributed. They drafted John Collins at 19 out of Wake Forest, and he, last year was, he's becoming a really good player, like a double-double machine, on the borderline of 20 and 10 a game. And, they found Kevin Herter last year late in the draft. So, I mean, yeah, having the 8 and 10 pick is great. There's draft capital there. They've got a great young core of Trae Young, Kevin Herter, and John Collins. But there's not, when you're picking 8 and 10, there's no real trade capital there.
Right.
But who's to say that Zion Williams' son, I think that's his name, is going to be a lottery pick? Remember Kwame?
Yep.
Remember Baby Jordan back in the day, Harold Miner.
Sure.
Remember all those draft picks. Just think
So
about
you're
all
saying
the top 5
Will-
picks that came out that they're not top 5.
Right. You're asking, will Zion Williamson actually work out? Sure. And really, the conversation around that is there aren't many times when there is a clear-cut number 1 overall pick in the draft in the NBA. It doesn't happen that often. We had LeBron. We had Shaq, years ago. We had Anthony Davis a few years ago out of Kentucky. There's been times when, you have these guys that come along that we're going to be the number 1 pick. And we have the same case this year with Zion. He looks like the real deal. You're right. I mean, it might not work out. And I do believe with the core that the Hawks have and what they can potentially do in free agency this year, I don't think they're going to sign a superstar, but they have money. They could talk some pretty good role players into coming here. If they can get a couple of guys that can contribute at 8 and 10, they do have, if I'm not mistaken, I think 3 second-round draft picks too. I don't know what any of that amounts to in the NBA. But, they do have 2 top 10 picks. You're right. If that's the silver lining in all of this, if that's what you want to go to. If anybody wants to call in and talk about that, the number here at the station is 678-383-2339. Okay, if you want to call in and talk about the draft lottery, and what kind of shook out tonight, feel free to do so. We're going to move on, though. We're going to talk about NASCAR. We're going to bring in my buddy Andy Gunnan.
Hello. I'm glad to be here, brother.
Well, I'm glad you're here too. So specifically, let me talk about how this kind of came about. So I've had a couple of people that have commented. My uncle's watching right now, Alan Spear, and he commented a couple times that he really wanted me to talk about NASCAR on here. And my comment was, I don't know anything about NASCAR.
Right. Yep.
And so Andy kind of messaged me on Facebook one day and said, hey, I got some NASCAR pointers and things I could send you, and you could talk about it. And I said, Andy, why don't you just come on the show?
Yeah, and that was awesome because you had mentioned when you were talking about the Masters how maybe golf was dying because Tiger hasn't really pulled off anything to get people excited about. And I said, no, NASCAR is dying. That's what I commented during the show. And then when you got off show, I was going to send you some notes. And when you invited me on, I was like, heck yeah, let's do this. Let's talk about it. Because being a fan for so many years and watching what I've seen around the Atlanta track and the enthusiasm in Atlanta and around and we're seeing it right now across the country, especially when Bristol just a couple of weeks ago sold 35,000 tickets out of 150. I remember a day when NASCAR was just everywhere you went. Every other person knew a driver, knew something about it here in Atlanta, in our hometown, and anywhere you traveled. I mean, it wasn't like football where it's just everywhere, but there was enough people excited, and I personally have seen that dwindle, and I think we're seeing it now in the ticket sales and everything that's happening. And when it hit Facebook, it's happening. Now, is it dying? Totally no. Is there still a good, strong fan base? Yes. I believe there's a good, strong fan base out there, but people aren't going to the races and going out to them. Heck, even when you drive by the Atlanta Motor Speedway during a race right now, you can see just vast empty lots where there would be trailers constantly and campers and people camping out, partying and having a good time. And I've noticed that personally.
Right. So here's the thing with NASCAR, and you and I talked about this a little bit. We had dinner before we came over here. Right. Thanks to the El Felix here at the Battery for feeding us a wonderful dinner.
Thank you, sir.
So we talked about this, and I started kind of looking back, and I don't know much about NASCAR, but what I have done in my lifetime is anytime there's there's been a sport I've always given it a chance. Like I'm gonna try to watch this and see if I find it entertaining. I did it with hockey when the Thrashers came to Atlanta.
Yeah, exactly.
I went to 5 or 6 Thrashers games. I went to I had people tell me, hey, watch the World Cup, you'll like soccer.
Right.
So I've tried all these things. I did the same thing with NASCAR, and we talked about it. I actually happened to be watching the Daytona 500 when Dale Earnhardt died.
Yes.
And it was funny
Sad
because
day.
I don't generally I probably could count the number of races I've watched on one hand, and I was watching that day when that happened. But I kind of started thinking about that, and then I pulled up the winners of the NASCAR Cup. It's been called a variety of things: the Winston Cup, the Sprint Cup. It's had different names through the years. But I pulled up the winners of it since 1980. And the thing about it is, when it starts getting into the years more recent, is when you have, I'm sure that some of these drivers are people that, diehard fans know, but basically you had a period of time since the mid 90s where it was dominated by Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson.
Right.
Tony Stewart got in there some,
Right.
and people know Tony Stewart's
Oh,
name
yeah.
for sure. But then since Tony Stewart retired, it's been Brad Keselowski, Jimmy Johnson, Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch,
Oh.
Jimmy Johnson again, Martin Truex Jr.,
Yep.
Joey Logano.
Mhm.
Now, if you're a casual sports fan, you still know a lot of these names, but
Right.
you don't know them the way you knew Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon, Terry Labonte,
Mark Martin.
Mark Martin, you mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
And so do you think there's a branding issue in NASCAR with drivers? Do you think it's just there's not as many legacy drivers maybe now?
Personally, I've seen the change from old drivers to new drivers. I believe a lot of this has come from TV.
Okay.
And I mean, think about it. Denny Hamlin basically did an interview and said, I wouldn't want to go sit in 90-degree heat in the stands and swelter all day when I can watch it from my iPhone. I think that's a part of it. But now going back to the old school guys, the Mark Martins, I was a huge Mark Martin fan over Earnhardt, even though I respected Earnhardt, because these guys, you got to remember the evolution of NASCAR before Senior hit that wall. And we had a change in the cars, we had a change in safety belts and all that. These guys would drive with broken ribs from the race the week before and just go after it. You couldn't pull Mark Martin out of a car.
Right.
Now, the thing about Mark Martin, he didn't win a lot of races. He won maybe about 10% of overall races. He raced 483 races, I believe, and won 43. Now, out of that, that's a 10%. But here's the thing. You couldn't pull him out of a car, but he was a top 5 finisher all the time. He was a top 5, top 10, and these guys fought it out. Now, what happened is NASCAR started playing around with the rules a few years back after Earnhardt. Well, when we saw Senior die, they pushed out the car of tomorrow way too fast, way too early. It was not prepared to go on the track. You couldn't drive it. Could it run? Yes. Did it drive well? No. Could not move around, and the drivers complained about it, and you could see it on the track. And that's where the changes started going in a different direction. It was poor management and that. And, don't get me wrong. It was a sad day when Senior died.
Right.
And everybody was shook up because he hit that wall 100 times that way, probably in his lifetime, and just walked away from it.
Right.
So there was a start of the evolution of people were going to start maybe walking away. Well, then they entered Junior, and here comes Junior. Junior, I'm a fan of him. But he wasn't what his dad was. I mean, just be honest about it. And you can even look at his race stats. I mean, he only won out of 19 years of racing, 26 major races. 26. Right. His dad won 76 races out of 27-year career.
Right. And we talked about that earlier because we talked about this legacy thing in sports that we witness here and there, and these guys, like I mentioned the Mannings and how Archie Manning was a really good quarterback, but it is a different era of football, but his sons probably both surpassed him, and that doesn't necessarily happen.
No.
Ken Griffey Jr. surpassed Ken Griffey Sr.
Exactly.
And so the pressure on Junior was huge when he came into racing because he was coming in. If I'm not mistaken, he came in after his father passed away, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
So, okay, cool. We're going to continue this conversation. It's fascinating to me because I don't know a ton about this. I do remember the popularity of it, and it seems like it has waned. We're going to come back and talk about it a little bit more. And my uncle says, if you can call in 678-383-2339. If you can call in, I've got some comments coming up here. We'll get to these right when we get back because I've got some people actually commenting on this, and I want to talk about this a little more. Stick around. You're in the huddle. It's Power 108.9.
Yes, we will talk about restrictor plates, Harley down.
Okay, perfect.
We're going to talk about restrictor plates and how that played a part of it as well. I kind of tiptoed over that a little bit.
I have got to put this phone number on my sheet every week. I don't know why I did that. Like the first couple of weeks, I put it at the very top. All right, so let me see. We've got. Let me go back and read some of these
you're
comments.
killing it tonight, baby boy.
I appreciate that. All right, so she don't know me. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, Brandon, we had a 31.6% chance of a top 3 pick, and we ended up with 8 and 10. We're not going to talk about that much more tonight. It's just going to pain me too much.
Yeah, Downer Carl.
Yeah,
two picks in the top 10, but he'll find a way to,
Leslie, we will talk about Ricky Bobby and Talladega Nights. Don't you worry.
Braves are down 11-1.
Brandon,
bases loaded.
Yeah, they're having him. And Mike Coltonavich pitched tonight. He's having a terrible start to the season.
Put him as a reliever.
I think so.
Yeah.
Brandon Grenin's favorite racer is Dick Trickle. Go figure.
AJ Foyt.
Ernie Irvin and Awesome Bill. I don't remember Ernie Irvin.
You don't remember Awesome Bill from Dawson Bill?
I remember Bill Elliott. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure. My Uncle Alan says racing is the best this year that has been in years. He's a huge fan. Give him Hell Dale. Junior was good, but senior, blah, blah, blah. Alan thinks Amanda does not know who he is. Amber says Carl is cute. Who is Amber? Amber.
Carl.
Oh, is that Matt Kennemore? Is that Amber?
Yeah, Amber. Yeah. Say to Matt Kennemore. Amber.
Is it Matt saying Carl is cute?
Yes.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
God, man, I miss you, Matt Kennemore. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, we were talking about you.
Love you, buddy. Swerving Irvin. That's funny. I'm glad that you guys are energized talking about NASCAR because
oh yeah, man. I mean, people have been waiting, I think, to talk about this. Hey, Bracco. Of course, I'm cute, brother.
That is the sound of 57. No, it's probably not. I don't know. I can't really pick out cars. You're in the huddle. It's Power 108.9. What's EPON? I don't know, Leslie. You ask me questions sometimes that I don't know the answer to.
That actually sounds like Gravedigger.
It's probably a monster
It sounds
truck.
like Gravedigger. That is Gravedigger all the way. Look, I've been to so many monster truck shows. Took my sons every year for like 14 years straight.
That's funny. Yeah, I've been to monster truck. Man, I went to the loudest thing I ever went to was a tractor pull at the Omni. Small building.
Oh my gosh, that place.
It was deafening. My dad and I mean, he just kept looking at me and I'm looking at him and I'm like, I was probably 13.
No earplugs. No earplugs.
Because we didn't know. We had no idea what we were getting into.
No.
Oh man. You're back in the huddle. We're going to continue talking about NASCAR with my buddy Andy Gunnan. Andy, so how are the ratings? How's TV? I mean, are people? You said that you think one of the problems is that people aren't necessarily going to the races because they can watch them.
Yes, that is great.
But that being the case, kind of one of the things I read is that the ratings have taken a little bit of a hit. Also, is that what your research kind of shows as well?
Yeah, I've saw. In my research, what I've seen, ratings have taken a hit. Well, here's the thing. When I don't know if I told you this at dinner, Lowe's just pulled their sponsorship out back in March, and that's a huge pullout of, and pardon the pun, but when you've got a lot of, I didn't mean to go Christopher Carter show right there, but that's where we went. I don't know. But when you got a huge backer like that sponsor that's been there since 2004 to, why are they pulling their money away? I mean, obviously, they're possibly not seeing a return on the investment. But, now is Daytona selling out? Yeah, Daytona's still selling out. So I'm not saying every race is just hurting, but Atlanta Motor Speedway most definitely is. We just saw Bristol is. And when people can watch it on their phone or watch it at home, and actually the coverage is way better. And to be honest with you, now that the tracks, and we'll talk a little bit about this kind of hurt NASCARs when they started changing the tracks. They changed Atlanta from a small track with high banks to a long track, and now everything is spread out. And for racers, we went there for the crashes. Let's just be honest about it. We went for the crashes, went for the fight. We went to see these guys
Sure.
duke it out. And that's what you go to a sporting event, to see these guys duke it out. And they're doing it at 175 to 200 miles an hour. And it's just, when you're right on the edge of, death and a wall at 200 miles an hour, it's like, it's exciting.
Right.
And, you can feel the engine. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You're good. No, I'm sorry. I know I looked off for a second. I remembered I had an article and I was trying to find in it
Right.
specifically something about TV ratings. That's why I pulled off for a second. I was still listening to you. And I do think that's part of it, because I've had Leslie Jones, who is on here and has the EPON. It's because your shirt's backward. Your shirt says nope. Now I know what she's now,
Is that
no,
Leslie Jones from
yeah.
Saturday Night Live?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
nice.
Yeah,
It
we
is
talked
backward.
about that before too. But she actually, when I made comment about never being at a NASCAR race, she's like, "Well, you got to go to a race," and she's talking about getting me into the race at Atlanta Motor Speedway next year. It turns out that you're mutual friends with the person that
Yes.
she said was going to get me in
That
the
is
race. So it is. I think so. All these things you're telling me, it's like that's the key, right? Is being at the race. So if you can't get all that by not being there, why aren't people going?
Well, I mean, like I said, the coverage is amazing now with what they're doing on TV with all the different camera angles and down, on the track. I mean, they'll have 2 or 3 screens up of not only the race as a big race, but individual cars. I mean, you just can't get that
Sure.
a lot of times. Now, yeah, can you chime in and listen on a radio and listen to what the drivers are saying to each other? But heck, I can pull it up on my iPhone and watch anywhere in the AC, drinking a beer somewhere, not spending. And that's another thing. It costs a lot of money to go to the race now.
You were
Costs
telling
a
me about
lot of
that.
money.
Tell everybody a little bit about that. What you were telling me earlier.
Oh man, back with the last few times I've been at the race, and I used to go a lot. When you're going into a race and you buy $120 wristband to get in, that's a lot of money. Now, are you there for 2-3 days? Yes. Now, Matt Kennemore, we're going to bring him up. He had a camping spot inside the Atlanta Motor Speedway for many years. We would go there and we'd set his trailer up. Everybody would buy a wristband for $120. We'd hang out. Now, he had a lot of expense in this. Now, he had $250 for the spot. He had to buy a minimum of 4 tickets. And please chime in, Matt, if I miss anything here. But that's $480 for 4 wristbands, $250 for the spot. That's not including your food. You're cooking out.
Sure.
You're drinking all weekend. You've got to get ice and different things as the progression of the weekend. Now, it's a great time because race fans are the best fans. Now, you can walk around anywhere and they'll just invite you in their trailer, hang out, eat some ribs with them, have a beer, and it's a mutual party. But when you sit down and look at it, and after the weekend you spent $3,000, $4,000 to hang out all weekend,
Right.
I mean, it gets expensive quick. And then you're talking about the travel and everything. It's exhausting and expensive. Who can afford a $4,000 weekend or $2,000 weekend to go do something? That hurts the pocket pretty hard.
Well, and that's the thing. And I do think it's funny. Sam chimes in and says, I don't go to sporting events at all now. Just nice to be home seeing all the angles. Leslie says, yeah, I think he's saying NASCAR fans are cheap and lazy.
I'm not saying that.
I don't think you're just saying NASCAR fans, though. No. I think this is a problem that all sports are going to face. And I know Leslie's an Atlanta United fan and goes to those games, but that's kind of a phenomenon that is not really happening for a lot of other teams. If you watch sports on television, and I'm not just talking about Atlanta. Atlanta gets a lot of flack for not turning out for live events. Turn on the Yankees game. The next Yankees game that you can find on TV, turn it on and see how many people are in the stands. They're not playing to packed houses for these sporting events. People can watch them at home. It's easy. It's cheaper.
Right.
It's not the $500. Like we were talking about, it's a $400 night out if you're going to take your wife and kids and go to a sporting event.
And Carl, when we went to go see the Falcons last weekend, I think it was,
Right.
We were talking about on the drive there, have you ever lived in a city that has had so many stadiums built?
No.
If they didn't come to see the events, why in the hell build all the stadiums? Because they come.
They do.
People are there.
But no, so where I would slightly disagree with you is the reason they build stadiums in this city is for the events that we get. We get Super Bowls, we get March Madness or the Final Four. I'm sorry, we get the SEC championship every year. We get the whatever the college football national championship. We are an event city.
But still though, Carl, name a city where they've built so many stadiums.
Sure, no,
You
it's
can't
no.
think
I'm
of
not.
it.
I'm not
I'm with
disagreeing
you,
with you
yeah.
on that. I mean, I'm saying you're right. So in our 57, I'm sorry. I'm not going to do the math in my head. 1965, I believe, was when the Braves came here. I think the Falcons were 66. So in that period of time, we had Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. We had the Omni. We had Turner Field, which was the Olympic Stadium. Then
96.
We had the Georgia Dome. We had Phillips Arena come along. We have now had the Mercedes-Benz Stadium built to replace the Georgia Dome. We have SunTrust Park, which is right out here beside us currently, and we have the rebuilt State Farm Arena, which they basically gutted Phillips Arena and made it a new building.
Right.
So that is a 50-plus year history with 8 buildings.
Right.
And then let's not forget we have now Georgia State.
Correct. Georgia
And
State's
then,
playing
with
football
Georgia
at
State
Turner
playing,
Field.
yeah, so they didn't get rid of
They
it.
didn't get rid of Turner Field. They
No.
kind of retrofitted
Right.
it for football. So you're right. I mean, it's an odd city, but I do think this is a growing thing that sports are going to have to encounter is how do we get fans to come to games? This is why this is why, and it ties into this, but this is why we're sitting in the Battery. And Andy and I were talking about this when we were walking around tonight.
Right.
Andy talked about missing going to Turner Field and tailgating in that parking lot and then
That's
walking
right.
into the game. But Andy also lives in Peachtree City, so he's on the south side of town.
That is correct.
Getting to Turner Field was easier for him than getting to the Battery.
Oh, 30
For
minutes
me-
versus an hour.
For me, I love the Battery. Like if I'm coming to a Braves game, I'm getting here at 4:00. I'm going to hang out at the El Felix and get my tacos. Then I'm going to go somewhere else and get a beer before I go in the game. By the time I go in the game, I'm not going to need to drink. I'm not going to need to spend the baseball park prices because I'm going to have had my fill
Right.
of beer on the outside. Same thing when you go to Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz, you go to a game, you've got all kinds of different, concessions and vendors and tap rooms and the variety of things that you can do. And they've made the concessions very inexpensive there. These are the things that are going to attract people to games now outside of the games where, United's an outlier. They're not having trouble currently, Brandon. You're right. And we'll see. I'm not trying to be a cynic on United at all, but we'll see in 5 years how full that building is for Atlanta United.
Right.
I'm not telling you that it won't be absolutely packed. You can tell me that it will be, and I will not have an argument with you about it. But I will tell you that the Thrashers games were packed for the first several years that they expanded, and then they also still had a hard time selling tickets when it got to the end. And we'll see what happens with that.
Right. And, Josh Philman just chimed in a minute ago and kind of go back to NASCAR and racing and what changes have kind of turned some fans off. And he's right. How do I feel about the competition, cautions, and stages? I don't like the stages. Realistically, when they came out with this stage program where they bunch everybody up and give points for the best, top 10 guys in different stages, they're trying to bring back the old school of let's give everybody in a pack, get them out racing. Because I'm going to tell you, if you go to a race, you sit on the start finish, you hear the engines cranking. When they come around and they drop the green flag, it's like no sound of it. It's like no feeling of it. We're just sitting there feeling the rumble and the pure horsepower of what's going on out there. And that's what NASCAR is trying to recreate because they have lost that with these big, super fast tracks. Atlanta being specifically the biggest track that when you go there, it's gotten to be a boring race because they spread out. They're running 220, 230 coming around the turns, and they are just not bunched up. And like I said before, I'm going to go back to my original statement, the fighting, the duking it out with the cars, driving 175, that's what we went in there for. We went for the wrecking and the bumping and the rubbing because rubbing's racing, baby. No matter what you say, rubbing's racing.
Rubbin's racing. Well, so that we're going to lead out with that for a second. We're going to step to a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about kind of NASCAR and popular culture because it was funny when Andy sent me a message last night. He's like, I'm getting fired up to come on the show. And he was watching Days of Thunder.
Yes,
we're going to talk about that when we come back. And yes, sir.
Is rubbing having sex too? Is that the same thing?
It's not Chris's type of rubbing.
I don't.
Chris Carter.
I think it depends. I think there could be a case made. It's a very interesting conversation. Stick around. You're in the Huddle. Power 108.9. Why did they take races away? Why did the second race go away?
well,
You want to talk about that when we come back?
We can do it when we come back.
Let's talk about that when we come back.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
So I want to go. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Let's talk quickly about the pop culture stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And then let's talk about your comedy.
Sure.
Okay.
We'll blow through it. Yeah.
We don't have to blow through it. I just kind of want